Y'all look at this little pile of goaties. Oh, look at them. Hello. So I looked out my window and saw Miriam walking, and her udder has swelled to such epic proportions that it's like interfering with her gait. You gonna stand up, girl? You gotta be so close. Look at this goat body. So wide. Bless her. She's so close. Y'all see her udder. All the babies. Look at her. God, I feel bad for her. So her ligaments are gone. That means we will have babies within the next 24 hours. I'm not sure how long they've been gone. I noticed her udder had swollen up a lot more from this morning to this afternoon when I looked out the window a little bit ago. We're close. We've got this, Mama. Miriam was my first newbie, and she was my second goat. I got her in 2015. She was just weaned. She was a baby when I got her. And I love her. She's a beautiful Nubian. As far as being like a really nice specimen, she's a very well-bred goat. She is an excellent milker with a perfect udder and gives almost a gallon a day. She's not a good mom. And this year, as I have struggled with does rejecting their kids, I've realized that it is actually very important to me to breed good maternal instincts into my herd. I don't show my goats, I breed them for home dairy purposes, so I want good milk lines, but I really want good maternal instincts. And I learned that this year with getting new goats and having goats that were bred for the first time that I've had. And I realized, like, I don't have time for goats that do not take care of their kids. Like right now, I've got 5 bottle babies. I don't want 5 bottle babies. It is taking up so much time to not only milk that I'm having to give to these kids, but then also feeding them and all of that stuff. So many goat breeders pull kids at birth, which means that as soon as the kids are born, they take them away from the moms, and then they milk the colostrum out, they pasteurize it, and they give it back to the kids. This is the only surefire way to prevent the spread of some diseases between the does and the kids. And this is how it's done on commercial dairies, but a lot of people who are like very high-end goat breeders, that's just how they do it. Just to have more control over the whole process, to have more handled kids, to be able to get the maximum milk production. I tried that one year and I really did not love it. I like kid sharing, which is allowing your does to keep their kids, and when the kids are 2 weeks old, you start pulling them at night. You put them in a separate stall where they can't get to the mom, usually with the other kids in your herd. And then in the morning you milk, and then you put the kids back on. And so the does feed their kids all day long, and then you still get milk in the morning. You don't get as much milk, but if there's some sort of emergency, like you have to be, somewhere with your kid, or you get really sick or something like that, you're not going to deal with infection and major problems if you miss a day of milking. If you are not kid sharing and you miss a day of milking, that's extremely irresponsible and you're hurting your goat. And even with kid sharing, you don't want to do that. It's better to keep them on a routine. It's better for your production to do that. But I like the insurance. I like knowing I have a lot of kids of my own. I like knowing that if something were to arise as a problem, if my goats have kids on them, it's not the end of our milking relationship for that season if I have to miss. And what I'm finding is that goat kids that were either rejected by their mothers or pulled from their mothers when they were born, they don't always have the same maternal instincts. Now, there are exceptions. I'm sure there are plenty of goats that were pulled that they have the instincts and they'll still take care of their kids. But I have found that my worst mothers were ones either pulled at birth or rejected at birth. And honestly, I'm fairly new to this. I mean, 6 years is not a long time to do anything. I still consider myself a pretty novice goat keeper. I've learned a lot in 6 years, and I definitely know more than I used to, but I'm still learning things, and I'm still developing preferences. And I've decided this season that it is my preference to only keep does that raise their kids. Now, I'll keep Miriam because she was one of my first goats. And she could still surprise me, Miriam has had kids twice. She very, very much rejected them both times, didn't even clean them off. The first time I thought maybe it was a fluke, so I bred her again. definitely did not take care of them. Thankfully, I've been able to, you know, pull her kids and keep them alive both times after it was clear she wasn't going to take care of them, and trying to make her and it not being successful. But now that I know that about her, I'm watching her like a hawk, because, you know, I don't want her to have her kids and me miss it and them die. Look at all the petals from the pear tree. It looks like snow over here. Springtime. Be still my heart. Ruth is getting pretty close too. Her udder's starting to fill out. She's a first freshener. I've left her over here because I don't think she will take well to being isolated. Ruth is Nestle's baby. Hey, girly. Hey, little darling. And Nestle is one of my sweet girls. You sure are pretty. You sure are a pretty goat. Oh, I just walked right by and saw her squat. Maybe she was just relieving herself. I really think she's extremely close. Now, I have not isolated Miriam like I usually do with the others, because I do know that she has a history of rejecting her kids. And the reason I did not isolate her is because while we're out and about all day today and she's so close, I have been isolating her at night, I should clarify. But today, why she's not isolated is because we're all out here working on different things, and I wanted to be able to just take a glance over and look at her and see what state she was in. Whereas she was in the barn, I would have to walk over to the barn to look at her. If she starts showing any more close symptoms, like any discharge or anything like that, I'll go ahead and put her in a stall. So, just kind of fun fact, the last set of kids that Miriam had that she did not take care of, it was a boy-girl set of twins, and it's been now about 2 years ago. And that the day she had those kids was the day that we met Bintern for the first time. Well, no, we had met him before that at our shindig. And then after that, he came to a plant sale. It's the same plant sale I've been telling you guys about that I'm going to be doing a book signing at. And we came home, and he was coming to our house for the first time to help. And I remember telling Jeremiah on the way home, I'm like, what are we going to teach this guy? Like, I mean, I don't know. Are we legit enough to have somebody like helping at our farm? Like, do we have anything to teach? Because Bintern was a homeschool kid growing up. And so like here he is as an adult, and whenever he wants to learn something, he just goes and finds an opportunity to learn it, and he wanted to learn homesteading. Well, we got home that day and Miriam had dropped her kids right before we got there. And so of course we get her all taken care of and try to get her set up with them. And by that evening, it became very apparent she wasn't feeding them and wasn't taking care of them. And she wasn't letting them eat even when we held her. And so it was kind of interesting that like Ben was like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted, because he's learning all the like aftercare of after birth, what you do with everything. And it was so like a exciting hands-on first thing. So when the first time he stepped foot on our farm, it was to Miriam dropping kids. And that set of kids that she had ended up going to the Stivers homestead. So their doe, one of their does that just kidded for the first time, is Miriam's daughter. We had really just met them and started becoming friends with them, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have these bottle babies, and we were in the middle of so much going on. And I told them, they said, oh, we'll take them. And I'm like, are you serious? You're really gonna drive from Kentucky for these goats? And they said, yeah, we're serious, we'll come get them. And they did. They drove down from Kentucky and took those goats home. So kind of cool. So no pressure or anything, Miriam, but you know, your birth is kind of marked like momentous occasions. Here, you beautiful garden. Oh, it's so good. Hey, beautiful greenhouse. I did quite a bit of work out here earlier today. So I have my fan going here. I'm actually going to turn it off for this video, but I'll turn it back on. If you're growing in a greenhouse or in your house, if you got grow lights, anywhere that's like a controlled environment that doesn't have wind, essentially, you need to get the air moving in there. And it doesn't have, you don't need to put a fan like directly on your plants. It does not have to be a strong fan, but it is really beneficial to have the air moving, because otherwise your stems on your plants will get just kind of puny because they don't have anything to like push up against, so they don't build that strength. So I have this little tower fan in the corner of my greenhouse that I keep running. It also kind of helps the air circulate and keeps it from getting too hot in here, because even with both the vents open, and they open automatically, and the door open, it was still like 95. So I still have some plants to separate. I'm working on it, but I probably got a few more trays to do. I gotta get my peppers out here. I still haven't even brought my pepper tray out here. They're still under the grow lights, which they're doing fine in there. They're looking really good. It's actually a little later in the evening, and I just came out here. I was gonna walk to the back before it got dark. Maya is working on his tool trailer, getting it all situated. You getting your stuff organized?
I am working towards it. It feels like a lot. I'm getting progress.
Nice trailer.
Preach.
This is Maya's little hidey hole. When I can't find him, he's usually out here sitting in his chair. In his little hidey hole. Yeah.
This is my office.
We call it his office. Look at that big boy. Look at those goofy dogs. I like coming back here and imagining how transformed this space is going to be in just a few months. So if you're watching this in like June, make sure you come pop forward and see the new space in June, because this is the transformation of this in just a few months is so wild. It just blows me away. I mean, the garden is that way anyway. Anytime it's like full blown the middle of summer and I go back and look at something on a video from like 3 or 4 months before, or like footage from just a few months before, I'm always like, wow, just the difference that a few months makes during this time of year is extraordinary. So I kind of changed plans a little bit out back. We put the pigs and the chickens back in the back garden, where last year we did melon, squash, and sunflowers. And we had them till it up and you know, fertilize it and all of that. And I'd meant to lay down compost or some sort of barrier and basically start building it up as a no-till bed this year. Well, then I decided I was going to plant my potatoes back here, which you can obviously do no-till, but when you're planting potatoes, you're digging them up, and there's just a certain measure of soil disturbance that's going to happen. And I was debating between this spot for them or up next to where they were last year. And when I realized that this spot had started to grow over with grass, and it was just kind of coming down to it, I needed to plant the potatoes, we just decided that we would go ahead and lightly run the tiller over this. We didn't till super deep, but just lightly run the tiller and plant the potatoes back here by the greenhouse. And then moving forward, this could be a no-till bed. So that was kind of my lapse of handling things on time. Typically, to do no-till, you kind of want to start working on it a few months before you're ready to plant. And I could have planted my potatoes here where the sweet potatoes were last time, and that would have been okay, but this I'm just going to mound up and cover and keep this no-till. But look at this space. We did extend it over just because the chickens and the pigs had kind of prepared more. The soil looks immensely better this year after 1 year of composting, and then after the pigs and the chickens being here. So last year we tilled this spot and then added a few inches of compost just clearly across the whole thing, grew in it. At the end of the season, we moved the chickens in over here, and we allowed them to just clean everything out. Then we had our little piglets we put over here for a while, and then we put the chickens back on it. So it's been a few months with animals on it, and they obviously added a lot to the soil. Now I actually do prefer a no-till garden. I do think it's better. But I'm also of the mind, being a purist about something at the cost of doing it at all any other way is not always the best way to be. And growing your food in a tilled space, if that's how you choose to garden at home, is better than going and buying conventionally grown food at the store. I like to try to remain pretty flexible. Now, one of the problems that comes up with tilling is that you fight weeds more. In a no-till space, continuing to build up and then keeping it heavily mulched, the weed pressure is usually a little bit better. But weeds are definitely an issue. And that was the issue with this back garden last year. I ended up really struggling with weeds in that garden more than any of the others. But my thought with growing potatoes back in this space and it being tilled is I like to do like a modified Ruth style method and pile straw up on my potatoes. And my thought was is if I do that, then I'm going to be heavily mulching this and it's going to help keep the weeds down some. Hopefully, in theory, that should help. This is a pretty big space. I mean, for reference, the greenhouse is 60 feet long, and this goes from halfway to the end, and then it goes probably another 8 or so feet past that. So it's about I would say probably about a 20 by 40 garden space. Of course, I figured that out measuring in dads. There's a joke here on this channel because Jeremiah busted me out once that the way that I measure things just by looking at them is I imagine how many of my dad, who's 6 feet tall, he's actually 6'2", but you know, about 6 feet tall, would fit in that space. And I just picture my dad like multiplied, laid out in a row. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, yeah, I would say that's about 3.5 dads by about 5 dads. Pretty accurate. So that's a pretty good sized garden. It's bigger than it was last year, but when we were moving the animals around, we kind of moved them a little wider around the space. And it looks really good. The only problem is we did this today, and when I had checked the weather, I knew it was supposed to rain tomorrow, but I thought it was gonna rain later. And I hope it doesn't start raining really early. It would be awesome to be able to come out and put those potatoes in before the rain starts. And at least get the first layer of mulch down, because this is freshly tilled, and once it gets rained on, it's gonna be a little more compact. So we got some bagged cattle manure here, and that is gonna go into this space. Might end up working out here a good bit tomorrow since it is supposed to be raining pretty heavily for most of the day. And that is one great benefit of the high tunnel, is you can work in the rain. But I just want to thank you guys so much. I put out one video asking for your advice and what you thought I should do over the soil issue we've been having out in our high tunnel, and you guys are so smart and generous with your knowledge, so thank you. I got so many comments that were encouraging and just good advice, a lot of things like basically saying, yeah, I think you're right, you're on the right track, and some ideas I hadn't even thought of. You know, one of the things that I like to teach to you guys and to encourage you in is that we should not be embarrassed of our ignorance. Like, if we don't know something, that's nothing to be ashamed about. And I teach people gardening. I just wrote a book about gardening. But when it came to this problem I was having with this soil, I kind of thought that I knew what to do. And in a lot of ways I was right, but I think I received some tips that will really help me. And I'll show you guys the process of what we do to kind of give this soil a boost and bring it back to health. And our main goal now is that we need to bring some life back into the soil. So we need to put organic matter back in it. It was mulched, and we took all the mulch off to like work directly in the soil. We need to kind of battle the fact that it's become a little hydrophobic. And so I'm gonna be doing some stuff about that. And then adding life back in it. And several people suggested worms, which my big concern about worms was I was like, man, is that gonna end up being really expensive? Because this is a lot of space. But then someone suggested that you can buy like worm eggs and you can put them in, which would be like a long-term fix. And I had no idea that you could buy worm eggs or encapsulated earthworm cocoons. Like, I had no idea. I knew you could buy live worms, but that I didn't know about the other. Multiple people also suggested a product like called water crystals. Somebody even said something about taking diapers and filling them with water and busting them and taking all of those gel inserts. And someone else had commented saying you could do that and even use like all natural diapers or whatever. And that mixed all in the soil would hold the water when the soil didn't and allow it to slow release, which I'm assuming that water crystals, when you purchase those, is probably a very similar kind of product. But I'm just like, all these things that I didn't even know about. And it made me really thankful, because I'll be honest, it's hard for me as someone who teaches gardening to be like, hey, I'm not 100% sure what to do here. Mostly because I do know in my head some of the right steps, but it's kind of overwhelming. It's kind of frustrating. There's kind of some emotions involved of like, ugh, I'm tired of dealing with this. I'm frustrated that we've put so much money into this and we're still dealing with issues. Like all of that stuff plays in anytime you're facing a problem in the garden. But a lot of times when you're saying, I don't really know what to do, I'm dealing with some ignorance on this. Ignorance is not a bad thing. Ignorance just means you don't know something because you haven't been taught it. And in that moment, being like, hey, does anybody have any information? And you know, I experienced a flood of information and suggestions and a lot of things I didn't know before, and I'm no longer ignorant to them now. And honestly, the main thing that I took from that on the other side of reading all of those comments was like, wow, like I can totally do this. This is not a hopeless situation. This is not endlessly frustrating. This is amendable. Don't get frustrated. Don't throw your hands up. Just jump in to the issue. All right, so another thing I learned from you all this week was that when kale starts to bolt, that the florets, the little unopened buds, are like a delicious sprouting broccoli, like broccoli rabe. And so when I came out here and saw these today, I was like, well, let me go ahead and put that information into play. So I'm actually picking these off. They said you have to catch them before they open to really have the best flavor. So I'm picking these off, and I'm just going to take a few of the little leaves around them with them, and I'm going to make these with our dinner. People suggested a few different ways of cooking these, but what I'm going to do is roast them like I would broccoli rabe. Like I just like to take sprouting broccoli, put some oil and salt and maybe some herbs on it, and roast it in like a 400-degree oven until it's soft and kind of maybe has a little crispy edges in some places, but mostly just until it's soft. And I think that this will be really good like that. I mean, all broccoli is the head of unopened buds on a plant which is a cousin to kale. So it makes sense that this would be very similar to like sprouted broccoli. But it's stuff like that that until somebody tells you, or until you get, you know, brave and experimental, you just wouldn't know. So here is to learning new things from brilliant, beautiful gardeners that know things that you might not know yet. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.